and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Quite a few different topics we're going to cover. A sheriff standing up to the IRS. We'll be covering that. I have another one covering vaccines that I wanted to go over. Also, one from the economiccollapseblog.com. If you listen carefully, the bankers are going to actually, or are actually telling us what is going to happen next. One out of Countercurrent News, family raided by police over suspected meth lab that turned out to be maple syrup. And I really want to get in depth in that one because the whole raids over suspected meth labs is something that I've seen locally, and 9 out of 10 times it turns out to have nothing to do with meth. If drugs are found, it's usually marijuana, and they're drugged through the court system. So I definitely want to get into that. And there's some other articles and topics that I'm going to cover. But first off, there was a panel hosted by Sean David Morton, and it included Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot, Adam Kokesh, Dean Ryan, 21st Century Wire, Sean Stone, son of Oliver Stone, Jim Mars, many of you know who that is, Laura Eisenhower, and Ben Davidson. So this kind of gets into activism, and why I really want to cover this is because as alternative media, we cover a lot of topics, but at the same time, we do face a problem reaching a broader crowd and fighting the mainstream narrative. And whether it be the whole war or economics or conspiracies, we are constantly inundated with oh, you're one of those people who every time a plane flies over and leaves any trail behind it, you claim chemtrail. Or, you know, if you don't support the Sniper movie, you're anti-patriotic. Well, if anti-patriotic means I don't support the government or their war racket, then I guess you can call me that. It's one of those things that a lot of these issues that we face are addressed in this, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and play this and cover this. So we'll just go ahead and get right into it.
You presented joining the military as if it was something that I would list on my resume, like something I was proud of. And I just want to make clear.
You wrote that you joined the military right here in your resume with your picture next to it. It says, I joined the military when I was 17. I presume you wrote this, sir.
No.
Did you?
No.
Tell the Congressional Committee.
No.
So
I just want to point out that it's taken me a while to realize this, but joining the military is either an act of ignorance, cowardice, or greed. There's no way around that, and I've taken that understanding into a lot of my activism.
why is that? Explain that statement.
Explain that? Ignorance, because people who join for good reasons are ignorant of the fact that joining the military doesn't help anyone except the war profiteers, the bankers, and the politicians. Greed, because a lot of people in the Marine Corps actually come in saying, I joined to get my teeth fixed.
Or tooth, as the case may be.
And cowardice, because, first of all, joining the military is not even in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in America. More troops die in car accidents than in combat, even at the height of all recent combat operations. And when you know there's a big threat and a little threat, and you say, I'm going to be really brave by going after the little threat and doing whatever the big threat tells me to do, that's cowardly. When you understand that the most beautiful part of the human experience is being an entrepreneur of your own happiness and taking charge of your destiny, saying, I'm going to aim higher. I'm going to be all I can be by following orders and being a cog in a machine. That's cowardice.
So, Adam, can I ask you a question then?
Sure.
All right, my question is, there's been a lot of controversy over the movie American Sniper. And the controversy being the fact that here you got a guy who had 160 kills. There's a lot of propaganda about, because he was in the process of divorcing his wife and hiding money, and now his wife is like, oh, I loved him so much. But at the same time, he then decided he hated killing so much, he came back to America and started, in essence, a group of mercenaries, which was called Kraft, yes? And these Kraft mercenaries were then implicated with backpacks and hats and the whole thing in the Boston bombing as well. But before they could actually nail down that thread, a crazy guy on a gun range then blows off American Sniper's head. Do you have any opinions on American Sniper and that whole thing, or him in the military-industrial complex then coming here and opening a group of mercenaries?
Well, I've done some videos about this, and I've been very fortunate that they've been picked up by people in the media who are reposting them, and I'm going to be on CNN with Dr. Drew on Monday, so I'm really excited that this conversation is happening as a result of this movie, and it's really inspired a lot of people to challenge American militarism. But I don't really care about Chris Kyle as an individual. You know, let's look at what he is being used for. Let's look at what he was always a part of here, you know. And it's not just a line about the war, and it should be no surprise that people who supported a war based on lies, hey, the hero's going to be a big liar. And I don't just mean about Jesse Ventura or about how he said he was shooting looters in Hurricane Katrina or he killed two carjackers in Texas. I mean, all those details are really irrelevant. But I want to connect this instead to the bigger issue of war itself being a lie. Hillary Clinton. Oh, yeah, we got shot at when we were running on down the tarmac in Bosnia. Oh, my gosh, I'm so tough. You know, like, oh, okay, Miss Clinton, sure. And then you have Brian Williams. Brian Williams, most trusted man in America, the great anchor of the nightly news that everybody follows. It defines the country's narrative on a daily basis. But you know what he just exposed in himself? Is that he's really the anchor for Amero fantasy land. And it's a place where most Americans live because it's what keeps this government racket going. And if they didn't keep you living in this fantasy world where the government can do no wrong and the troops are brave and the cops are there to serve and protect, then the whole racket would start to fall apart. And Chris Kyle's just one element of that narrative. And I'm actually really encouraged by this. And if I may comment a little bit on the bigger picture that's been touched on here today, this conversation, the conversation around American Sniper, is really encouraging because it's starting to get to the heart of the issue. Now, a lot of people are debating, was Chris Kyle a hero or not? Who cares? I mean, the concept of heroism or idolizing people is a dangerous one to begin with. But it's a distraction. even if you go to an anti-war protest, a lot of people say, well, that's good, we're stopping war. And I started with the Iraq Veterans Against the War with my activism when I got out of the military. And of all the activism, when you can stop people from being killed, I think that's the most valuable. But even then, if you're protesting the war and not the militarism, and you're saying, this war is wrong, we have no justification, but you're not saying, gee, maybe we shouldn't have a standing army. Maybe we shouldn't live under this government racket. Maybe the idea of government, to govern, to control by force, and all these other things that we talk about are symptoms of this fundamental disease in humanity of statism, that we turn to government and we expect that somehow magically government can make things that are immoral, moral. Things that I would never be allowed to do as an individual. If they call it taxes, stealing is okay. If they call it war, then, invasion and wide-scale murder is somehow righteous and glorious. And even the talk about all the things that people on this panel have mentioned as very legitimate things to be afraid of, it's reasons to be afraid. And a lot of these are really distractions. You want to talk about propaganda, we are emotionally manipulated by governments. I think everybody listening today knows that. But do we emotionally manipulate ourselves the same way? If government is saying, hey, we're good and righteous and you should just watch football and not pay attention, and they say, no, we should pay attention to all the bad things government is doing, you're missing the third way here, which is to build the future that we all want to see possible, of a free, voluntary, harmonious society based on respect for individual rights and the non-aggression principle, and respect for just basic human rights, decency, and embracing a deeper understanding of ethics and morality. And we don't have to think of this as, and I just want to say one more thing, that I disagree with the concept that we're coming to a crossroads. That's kind of fear-based. Doesn't it sound like, if you don't grab your pitchforks now and overthrow this system, the world's going to hell and it's going to be 1984 and totalitarian government and boot stamping humanity's face for the whatever, 1,000 years. No. This is, you step back one more step, and you see that what we are a part of is a beautiful evolutionary spiritual process of humanity ascending and achieving a state of greater harmony. And when you can embrace that in your daily lives, that's how you find a greater level of satisfaction. That's how you really find your soul as an activist. And that's how you get to, not have to, get to be a part of this beautiful process.
Breaking into your house at night. You tell him Jim Mars lives there. All right, Sean Stone. Actually,
I'll answer that. I'll answer that. I'll tell you. You raise him in a world where he is educated about his own love for himself. You educate him in all the ways that he can find happiness peacefully and voluntarily. And you take out this idea that somehow because you feel like something immoral can be justified, you do it.
That's what I'm going to do with the guys in my basement. Obviously. That's what I'm supposed to do. Sean Stone. Okay, go ahead. Finish your sentence.
It's not a simple process, but the idea of saying that because people are bad, therefore we need to give certain people arbitrary power to do immoral things and call them government, like that's not going to attract people, that's not an answer, that's not an argument.
Okay. Ben Davidson, what do you want to say? Jump.
I had no idea.
Like I said, I've broken up quite a few fights on panels, so it's dove in between quite a few people.
First of all, I had no idea Jordan Maxwell was back there. That's all.
Hey, Jordan, what's up, buddy? Sorry.
This is the kind of thing that I was talking about earlier. Illuminati. Are you guys really afraid of a group that Dan Brown successfully shred in a best-selling novel and then Tom Hanks did the exact same thing on the big screen? Twice. Yes. Who here in the audience or up on this panel knows the difference between the Illuminati and the Order of the Illuminati? If you do not, you probably should not be speaking on the topic. In terms of HAARP, there is only one HAARP. It is in Kokona, Alaska. It was not our friend. There are plenty of other high-frequency auroral heaters. However, in order to keep the opposition to geoengineering out of the mainstream, in order to make all of us seem insane, seem crazy, so that nobody will listen to us, they point us all towards one word or one concept or one idea, and they focus us there such that anytime there's a strange cloud in the sky or there's a strange storm or something that happens that we don't expect to happen, we blame it on HARP. Anytime there is a they, a them, who is they? Who is them? Does anybody know who they or them is? I mean, we all have this idea that there's something going on.
Camelot videos?
What?
Have you seen my videos? If you're asking that question.
I've seen quite a few of your videos. Have I
Okay,
looked at
well,
every...
then you should have the answer. Ask Jordan Maxwell can tell you.
Finish your thought. Go ahead.
The point is that we tend to get everything that is considered a conspiracy and every single theory placed on every single person that is within that realm of thinking. So if I'm a conspiracy theorist, every single conspiracy theory that is out there is being put on me by the people in the mainstream. So if it doesn't matter if I have all the evidence in the world, or if Sean has all the evidence in the world for something. You take 10 completely baseless and lunatic conspiracies, and that is what the mainstream sees of us. One of the things I was hoping for, and I'm really glad that we had a call for an actual back and forth discussion, is because if not for the fact that there is so much clouding going on of these topics, if not for the fact that we, by definition, allow our minds to be open and go everywhere, we would already be being taken seriously. You made the comment at the start that, well, okay, who is it that's ignoring us? It's those 6 main media companies. I've been on the news plenty of times. I've gotten professors, people at NASA to listen to me, to write papers with me. And it's not like I'm towing the mainstream. The difference is, and where you have to go with this, is if you are going to challenge these mainstream ideas and bring into the light this world, this matrix that has been hidden from us. And I'm not saying that these conspiracies don't exist. I'm not saying there's not a they. I'm saying that there needs to be somewhat of a corralling, somewhat of a logic that is placed on all of this so that we don't dovetail out of control and we don't venture into, speculation, and we give things proper names, and we recognize when everything is pointing us towards the word HARP, when most of their weather modification and things that affect the human body are in low frequency, or, LARF, or they're using satellites. The idea that high frequency, the idea that HARP could actually blast me while I'm sitting right here is nonsensical, especially the ionospheric heaters, which point straight up and have a...
What's your conclusion?
The conclusion is that there needs to be what she described. There needs to be this back and forth. There needs to be argument, because otherwise we are all just saying what our open minds are allowing us to say. And just having the open mind isn't enough. You have to wake up once, and then you have to wake up again and put a harness on it to some extent. Okay. Otherwise, we're all going down.
Adam and then Laura. Adam, you have something to say?
Just a quick response I'd like to give to try to put this in perspective in terms of where we devote our time and our energy and our attention and what our actions really represent in our values and how we prioritize. And I feel like I could try to embarrass a lot of people in the room and do a little show of hands game and say, how many of you know about theories about ancient aliens and are familiar with that? How many of you know about HARP? How many of you know about 9/11 and have researched the various conspiracies and all the detail about the events of that day? How many of you know about the Illuminati versus the Order of the Illuminati? How many of you know about the New World Order? And then we could do another round of show of hands of how many of you know how to grow your own food? How many of you know how to talk to cops? How many of you know how to talk to yourself in a healthy, positive way? How many of you know how to meditate, how to be happy, how to talk to your kids and keep them from enlisting, how to talk to the people around you about the things you care about, and how to join this process of moving humanity forward rather than being diverted by the personal, inward, emotional manipulation that we impose on ourselves of wanting to recognize that fear, to feed that demon. And I would just say redirecting our attention and thinking about these questions, thinking about what we actually devote the time to be familiar with really says a lot about our values. If we consider our values in terms of where we devote our time and attention, I think a lot of these issues stop mattering.
Laura?
No, I said I don't know if Quentin Tarantino knows about mind control. I don't.
Yes, question. Right behind. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Quick question for everybody. Adam, you started touching on this a little bit ago, and I'm hoping to get a quick answer from you guys. What are the practical things that we can do as truth seekers, as people that are becoming activists, trying to take an active role instead of sitting on the sidelines? What is something practical, whether it's financial, spiritual, health, across the gamut? Some advice for people that want to get involved with you guys.
Okay, actually, we kind of have to wrap things up, so that might be a good question because we've only got about 10 minutes or so. Everybody want to say? Actually, Carrie, why don't you start with that?
You got a half hour, I think.
We have a half an hour? Okay. Okay, all right, never mind. All right, anybody want to answer that question?
Can you repeat the question?
Go ahead, answer the question.
Well, I thought, I'd be happy to hear other panelists' opinion on this as well.
Of course.
But for me, what I discovered in my own journey as an activist is that when you wake up to the nature of government or the world around you or whatever it is that you think you are waking up to, the first reaction is almost always negative. And I feel like there are a lot of people, especially in this room right now, who are in that stage of their activism where you wake up and you go, oh my gosh, I'm angry. And I'm frustrated. And I'm afraid. And I'm depressed, even. I mean, do people feel that when talking about these subjects, when we start learning what's really behind the curtain, right?
It kind of makes you powerless. Makes you feel
you
powerless.
feel helpless,
what can I do?
Right? And then you go out on the street corner and you say, now join me in my fear and my anger and my depression. And everybody goes, fuck you. I'm going back to watching Dancing with the Stars. So if you really are a truth seeker, you know that the truth is liberating. You know that it's going to make your life better. And I think the first answer is to get in touch with that for yourself. Is what you're doing improving your life? You are choosing to do it, so at least you think it is on some level. Really consider that against your values, and then find a way that you can take that improvement to get you past that stage of your activism. To get the kind of emotional and mental freedom that allows you to take the truth and instead be frustrated and angry and depressed, to be happy and free and in control of your own mind and say, look, I live better because of this understanding. I'm happier. I'm healthier. I have better relationships. I'm moving through life with a sense of purpose. And when you can do that, when you have something that you know is of value to other people in a way that's made your life better, not a way that's made you satisfy your fears, but in a way that's really allowed you to engage in a more positive way with the universe, share that.
Okay, next up, anybody else? Laura, take it.
Can you speak on the sovereignty? For my knowledge, in the planetary Akashic records, is that we're being given this stimulus to metamorphosize. All that you've been describing in this panel is an opportunity.
Okay, I keep trying to find a question in there. So what's the question?
Can you speak on sovereignty? Because that's the birth of the new divine human. Is that my
Okay, speak on sovereignty as the birth of the new divine human. Okay,
absolutely.
Okay.
I'd be happy to. I think it's fundamental to humanity moving forward right now.
Briefly, because we're running out of time. So
recognizing the divinity of the individual and that sovereignty is respect for how we relate to each other. And a lot of people take this back to the way that people have traditionally spoken about libertarian philosophy as a matter of leaving me alone or fighting back or that kind of political conflict, when really it's about getting to that recognition of the individual, and it's about connectedness, because when you respect the sovereignty of every individual, it means that relationships are voluntary, they're free of force and coercion. And I understand what you said about the Akashic record being something that is imprinted in all of us from everything we do and all of our experiences. And I think as we live that, when you embrace that and you open your mind, you open your heart to really considering that, then you can change the way you relate to yourself and relate to others. And sovereignty is just one way of describing that has a lot of political implications, but it really is something a lot more spiritual, communal, and essential to connectedness than that.
Adam Kokach, what do people most need to know?
The biggest conspiracy is not hidden at all. It is right in front of all of us. It is something that we all participate in and tacitly endorse with our daily actions. And it is the concept of government. It is the racket of statism. It is the global paradigm of it being okay to do immoral things if you have enough people behind you, or a fancy hat, or a shiny badge, or a nicely written law behind you. And you don't have to spend a lot of time in fear or in research to resist this, to free yourself, and to allow this understanding to make your life better. And when you can do that, if your activism is something that makes your life better and you can share that with people, that's a beautiful thing. That's what I've made my mission as an activist. And I'd be honored if anybody here would check out my website, thefreedomline.com. I have a free book there And I've got stickers. I'll be at the 21stCenturyWire.com table right after this, and I got a table upstairs. Thank you very much.
Adam Kokesh, ladies and gentlemen. Dean Ryan, what do people most need to know?
I came here to chew bubblegum and defeat the New World Order, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
All right, Dean Ryan, ladies and gentlemen, right there.
Okay, you can find that clip from Adam Kokesh on YouTube. It's titled "How to Be an Activist." But there's a lot of important things that were discussed in that, and it was something that it was just perfectly lined up there for me to just play the clip instead of going over it individually myself. But one thing, it's something that I've talked about a lot. And that's the whole concept, if you look at the opening a door for someone and how that interaction feeds. Well, your activism is the same way. The way you present your activism, the way you approach people, definitely people that are definitely still stuck in the paradigm of either whether it be, politics and the left and the right or government itself, when they're stuck in that fallacy paradigm, you have to be able to approach these people in a way that doesn't keep them closed-minded. You have to be able to approach them in a way that makes them consciously think. And I think that has become an important thing in activism anymore. Even when you look at maybe pro-government socialist type activism, even there, you're not reaching people the way you should. And liberty activists are very diverse. And that's where I think it becomes harder. You got so-called liberty activists that really are hardcore still into the political, let's try to convert the Republican Party. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the people that are there are very small L libertarian people, because really they still have a high belief in government compared to more libertarian type people. Now, I don't want to bash people that say, well, to get to these libertarian ideas, we have to gradually step down government. Otherwise, you will get these people that freak out. But I think there is a counter to that, and it's through the big L libertarian ideologists or philosophers. I'm not going to say, that we should group into that type grouping. So I'm not a big proponent of libertarian party. I don't believe I think people should be judged by the fruits from their own tree. It's one of those things, though, that the activists, the ones that are actually promoting a conscious thought into what does liberty mean? What does freedom mean? When you start approaching it and you can relate to the people that you're trying to speak to, I understand, you can't get a good job. They have regulations stacked on top of you. Okay, I should be back on. I lost connection there for some reason. Okay. Now, what I was saying is we have to be the ones to change the people's minds. So when you approach people that, you understand that, well, of course they're wanting this welfare because the government has put them in a position where it's hard for them to provide for themselves. But when you approach them, don't approach them like you're just siphoning off me and I pay my. You have to approach them in a way that really um, can relate to their struggle. And it's that if government for hundreds of years has stacked regulation upon regulation, and these corporations have done nothing but get bigger and bigger, and now it's harder for you to work. Do you really want the handout that government's going to give you? Does that not promote that type of behavior? Not only that, shouldn't you be fighting against the government? Basically telling the government to get out of your business because you as an individual have the right to prosper on their own fruits of their labor, whether it's working for yourself or for someone else, and the governmental intrusion is nothing more than extortion to take your money to pay for wars to kill innocent people that you don't agree with, or to pay for people that don't want to work because they know that they can play the system for the benefits. I think there was one study out that said that if you figure out a way to receive almost all the benefits that government will give you while not working, you can make around $27 an hour. And that's an incentive for a lot of people not to work. Definitely when their other option is going to work at Walmart or McDonald's and make maybe $9 an hour. We want to get people off of welfare. We want people to work for their own and provide for their own or not. You have that freedom, but that doesn't mean that then this artificial entity called government should be able to come and steal your fruits of your labor to pay for someone that chose not to work. And to do that, we also have to realize that government is what makes it harder for people to even have that one because they put the roadblocks in the way through extortion and permits and all that in the name of safety, which doesn't ever turn out to really prevent anything that they want. What if we didn't have police on the street? People would be killing people. Have you turned on a TV? And have you not noticed, a lot of these stories you see in alternative media is not a person killing a person, it's a police officer, which is still a person killing a person. But because we give them this artificial thing, they can get, most of us, if we were in those exact situations, you might be shot by the police or you will definitely be caught and put in jail, not on paid leave or unpaid leave. We still have this, exemption for law enforcement, and we treat them as they're not human beings. And that's the major flaw. So the way we approach our activism has to be a reflection of what we claim to believe in. And, that's something that I've always worked towards. That's something that when I interact, I constantly work on bringing that message to people that I discuss this with in a better way that more relates to them, makes them go, I never thought of it that way. And, I was talking to one gentleman, and I made I was talking about what a mafia does. And every time I kind of pointed out how the mafia operates, I go, and kind of government does that in this way too. And by the end of it, he's sitting there just kind of deer in the headlights. And he goes, I never really thought of it like that. And it makes perfect sense. And that's one way to approach it. But there's other people that you will run across that you could not approach it like that. For them, they might take it offensively or whatever. It doesn't end up turning out well. It doesn't bring a result on that is favorable. Okay. I'm going to move on to something here. Okay. This one from freekeen.com. Judge Burke sentences James to jail, suspended. Heroic activist, blogger, entrepreneur, and Free State Project participant James Cleveland was sentenced in Judge Burke's courtroom in Keene, New Hampshire, for charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. His charges stem from a June 30th incident in which James was video recording police. According to officers' accounts, James was ordered to move back from an active scene. And when he complied, after complying with the first officer's request, a different officer demanded he move back further. He refused and was arrested. The allegation by police is that James's refusal to move when ordered is what resulted in his disorderly conduct charge, and the physical movement of his recording arm when arrested is what resulted in a resisting arrest charge. Both charges are Class A misdemeanors that are each punishable by up to 1 year in jail and $1,000 in fines. On December 30th, 2014, Judge Burke found James guilty of both charges in Cheshire County District Court. Yesterday, Judge Burke sentenced James to 1.5 years in jail, suspended on the condition of good behavior plus $625 in fines. James has decided to appeal this decision to Superior Court. A date is not yet set for the new trial. Here is a video from the first trial of James Cleveland, in which he defends himself pro se. And I'm not going to play a clip, but you can find it at freekeen.com. Judge Burke sentences James to jail, suspended. And if you want more background on the whole thing, you can find more information at Freekeen. They have more stories on James Cleveland, so go there. I'm kind of debating on which one I want to go with next here. I had a few things I want to cover. I got a few things about vaccines. Those all grouped together, and I got a few things covering local law enforcement, and I'll get to those. But there was something else I wanted to cover here too. And I have one here from AMTV with Christopher Green. Greece threatens to exit Euro for Russia. And it's under the title, Grexit, Greece on the chopping block, euro to collapse, which many people have been waiting for the euro to collapse. I don't think it's going to collapse in the way a lot of people think. I think it's just going to slowly disintegrate, kind of like the US dollar. Um, and before I go ahead and play this clip, I want to tell people about Amagi Metals. Amagi Metals, they're the choice for me when it comes to buying precious metals like gold and silver. I've found great customer service, plus they have great selections and great prices. Um, you can get, a Ron Paul or a Murray Rothbard or a Ludwig von Mises coin. They have other freedom coins. They even have base metals like copper. You can buy a little ounce of copper or something that says freedom on it, or they have multiple ones. Don't tread on me. But great gifts to also give out to people, to try to just promote the message. And I personally haven't dealt with anybody quite as good as Amagi Metals. My personal experience has just been great. They also carry, Sons of Liberty. Last time I checked, I was actually able to get the Sons of Liberty silver cheaper from Amagi than directly from Sons of Liberty, because they give you a great price without having to buy bulk. And I'm talking, very little above the price they bought it for. And when they buy it in bulk, it gives them the opportunity to sell it in small amounts for not, cheaper than what you can buy it yourself from the same mints. If you go to antityrannynews.com/metal, you can check out Amagi Metals, and they're also introducing a tier program. So not only did they have some of the best prices I've seen for gold, but they will be doing bulk tier program for gold, and you'll even get better prices. So check them out, and when you go to that link, you're helping support Anti-Tyranny News in this broadcast. So that's antityrannynews.com/metal. And, when we look at the euro, it's a perfect example, and look at Europe and Greece and everything of how the monetary policy can dramatically impact your life when you don't have, your eggs in multiple baskets when you put them all in one basket, whether it be the US dollar, euro, or anything, Bitcoin, gold, silver. You're playing a losing hand eventually. So I always urge people to be diverse, and gold and silver is one way of putting some of your wealth into a currency. And, gold and silver and jewels, you can look at, thousands and thousands of years of these things being successful as a trading and bartering item. So it's something I do put trust in, but not all my eggs are in that basket. So when you look at stuff like Greece, it's a perfect example. And this one from AMTV, Christopher Green, it kind of highlights what is going on with the euro and its collapse, and the potential for Greece to try to align with Russia, which I've been telling people about China, Russia, and how they've been working with other countries trying to get an alliance for a alternative to U.S. dollar for the petrodollar or the world currency. And I believe that Russia and China are in the position, I think mainstream and some alternative media are ignoring the fact that no matter what they can do with their yen or any of that, the fact is they're hoarding gold in large amounts. They've been buying up gold just, at enormous rates that in the end they'll have something to back their money with. their currency will be back. They are not relying on oil at its basis. And we know that the central banks, the ones that don't, all the central banks that are basically one bank, the World Bank, don't have influence in these countries, because if they did, these countries wouldn't have their currency being able to be backed by gold. And we know that from our own history here in America. And I urge people to read The Creature from Jekyll Island about the Federal Reserve System and how Rockefellers, Morgans, and everybody came together to create the Federal Reserve and the whole monetary policy that we are now under. And you can also find that on the front page of Anti-Tyranny through the Amazon link there. But let me go ahead and play this clip.
Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The leftist anti-austerity Syriza party has swept to victory in Greece. Syriza won 149 seats in the 300-seat parliament, too short of an absolute majority. This marks the first time since the economic crisis in 2009 that a member of the 19-nation Eurozone will be led by a party rejecting German-backed austerity. The head of the Syriza party, Alexis Tsipras, will become Greece's new prime minister.
Greece is turning a page. Greece is leaving behind catastrophic austerity. It is leaving behind the fear and the autocracy. It is leaving behind 5 years of humiliation and pain. Today, there are no winners and losers. Today, Greece's elite and Greece's oligarchs were defeated. Our victory is also victory for all the people of Europe who are fighting against the austerity that is destroying our common European future.
Supporters of Syriza praise the party's vow to renegotiate Greece's debt agreements and its willingness to oppose the austerity measures demanded by the European Union and International Monetary Fund.
Before we get started, please check out our sponsor, Lear Capital. Click the link below right now. Buy gold, buy silver, do it today. Again, folks, I can't think of a better time to buy gold with Greece on the chopping block, with the Eurozone in tatters, with record debt here in the United States, with the U.S. stock market trading at an all-time high. There's a reason smart investors own gold and silver. It's real money, it's real wealth, it's real protection. Gold is not a short-term investment. It's long-term diversification. Pick up a phone right now and call Lear Capital. Click that link below and download a free investor kit. Take control of you and your family's financial future right now. Do it with Lear Capital, the precious metals leader. Hey, everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. We have a big, big day in global financial markets with Greece on the chopping block. And the question on everybody's mind is, will Greece stay or will they go? Will Greece stay or will they go? That's the big question. I think in the short term, they'll strike a short-lived deal with the Eurozone, with the Troika, with the whore bag that makes up Angela Merkel. Because Greece actually holds, I believe, most of the leverage right now. Let me explain this. Let's say Greece, the Syriza party, the newly elected anti-bailout, anti-austerity party, the people of Greece have been in the streets with their pitchforks. It turns out they don't like debt. They don't like austerity. They don't like getting screwed by the banks, by these central bankers, by these central planners, papering over the debt since the last bailout in 2010. You see, if Greece can't get their loan from the West, from the Eurozone, from Angela Merkel, all they have to do is step over here and get lending from the competition, either Russia and or China, the BRICS nations. Now, if Greece was to do that, that would be extremely significant politically because it would give Vladimir Putin a footprint right smack dab in the heart of the Eurozone. A NATO country. I mean, he could even put strategic military bases right in the heart of Europe. You see why we're at war with Russia? You see why there's all of this dogma, all of this propaganda this painting of Vladimir Putin like he's the next Hitler, like he invaded Ukraine. I even read a story from the Pentagon, I believe it was, that accused and claimed Vladimir Putin of having Asperger's syndrome. I mean, these stories are absolutely ludicrous. But again, Greece is on the table, and it's very significant because it's one of the first pigs nations, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Spain, to potentially leave the euro. Even Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, agrees with me. He says the euro is doomed. The eurozone is going to break apart. Maybe not in the short run. Maybe they'll sign a short-term deal, but it's going to fall apart. It's going, and already is, largely destroyed. But Alan Greenspan, part of the New World Order, brings up something very important. He says specifically that in order to continue or to fix the eurozone, not only do they need to be economically integrated via a single currency, the euro, even though it hasn't been working. I don't know why you'd want to do that after 20 plus years. It's already going in the shitter, in the toilet. But not only that, he says something very important. He says they would need to be integrated politically. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, because this was conspiracy theory years ago. In addition to being integrated with a single currency, the euro, he says that the eurozone, the 19 member states, need to be integrated politically. Doesn't that sound like a new world order to you? See, this is what the program is about, because again, nations are bankrupt. Just like here in the U.S., the Federal Reserve has $4.5 trillion worth of debt on its balance sheet, most of it which are mortgage-backed securities that it bought from the last crisis in 2008 and 2009. We don't even know the percentage of those that are distressed mortgages. It also has derivatives on its balance sheet. I mean, it's insane. It only has tens of billions of dollars in equity compared to the trillions of dollars worth of debt. I mean, this is leveraged 6 times worse than Lehman Brothers was prior to the collapse of 2008 and 2009. Yet the establishment wants to go out and attack presidential candidates like Rand Paul for wanting to audit the Fed. If the Federal Reserve had to mark its book to market, it would be insolvent. It is bankrupt. It is broke. Again, it's worse than the too big to fail banks. It's the taxpayers that bought all the bullshit in 2008 that'll now be living the repercussions of what's to come. Another systemic shock. And the Greek people, the people of Greece, they know this. It's exactly why they put in an aggressive Syriza party to negotiate, to try to change things for the better for their people, to address things like structural unemployment, not these bogus numbers that we get here in the United States of America. It's amazing to me, with all this on the table, all of this happening in reality, with mainstream credibility at an all-time low, Brian Williams lying straight to the American people's faces that there's not more angry peasants in the streets. Again, the elite, those that meet in Davos every year and buy and eat and chomp on $45 hot dogs, need to maintain order. It's how they're getting wealthier. It's how they're buying pet projects in New York City that overlook Central Park, these $25 million plus condos that nobody lives at, that the global elite that's been ripping off everybody around the world buys to diversify their portfolio, to park their criminal cash. You see, the Federal Reserve here in the United States, folks, is criminal. The Eurozone, these players, these whore bags, these money printers like Angela Merkel, criminals in the Eurozone. They're ripping you off, and it's all falling apart. It's exactly why there's a war against Russia. It's exactly why they've artificially driven oil prices into the shitter. It's exactly why the Swiss bank, not too long ago, with a surprise move, depegged from the euro, because they know the euro is going into the shitter. There are some major banks here in the States and around the world that say the euro could drop to 90 cents to the dollar. When, not if, when Greece eventually leaves the Eurozone. Again, which pig's nation will be next after that? Which peasants from which country are going to get into the streets and riot and elect the equivalent of their Syriza party? What sucks about the upcoming election here in the States is we don't have a lot of quality candidates. The only person close is Rand Paul. He's the only guy saying, audit the Fed. Hold these scumbags accountable. No, vaccines should not be mandatory. And the mainstream media and establishment treats this guy like he's insane. A constitutionalist, somebody who actually values America and values the country. You know, I've thrown a few criticisms at Rand Paul in the past, but the more and more I see how this is shaking up, the more I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe we should support this guy. Maybe we should give him more ammunition, so to speak. You know, we need somebody to stand up to these people. We need somebody to stand up to this political union, this more integration. Because you know what they're going to do next? When everything crumbles to the ground and fails again and there's another systemic shock that makes 2008 and 2009 look like a church picnic, when you're on the streets, when you've lost everything, they're going to tell you that the solution is more integration, that we need an even greater political union so that these criminals can maintain their power and control over the world. You know, have these people forgotten? It's the people. They represent the people. It's not the other way around. We, the people, have the power. We, the people, organize. We, the people. This is a representative government here in the United States of America, not the other way around. These are the problems that we're dealing with. A Hillary Clinton running for the third term of Barack Obama in 2016. Another freaking Bush from this elitist kingship clan. It's a friggin' joke. It's why this country is in the toilet. I agree with Rand Paul. Audit the Fed today. Throw these criminals in jail. Let's take our country back. Let's take Europe back. Viva la revolution. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere.
Christopher Green, AMTV. Find him on YouTube. Now, you know, I don't have any special hope in the political scene. I just don't see it happening. Definitely at a federal level. I think the only way it can happen in any form would be at the local level, and even then, you know, you're going to have your issues. But I want to get into vaccines, but I want to cover a couple police things first. This first one coming out of benswan.com, once I find it here. Exclusive, sheriff stands up to IRS cancels land sale. Washington, February 7th, 2015. New Mexico's Eddy County Sheriff Scott London notified the Internal Revenue Service via letter that the sale of county resident Kent Carter's property is canceled until Carter receives due process of law and his appeal is heard. The certified letter dated February 4th received an immediate response from the Undersecretary of the Treasury's office. According to the Treasury's website, however, the public auction is still slated for February 19th. Many officers have stood up over the years for rights of citizens being victimized by the federal government, said Sheriff Mack, founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He said, but Sheriff London is the first one to stand up to the IRS since the early 1990s, Max said. His actions show courage and humility. London is setting a good example for the rest of our sheriffs. Approximately 10 days before Christmas, U.S. Marshals broke in the door of Carter's rental property with their guns drawn. The tenant was a young mother with a new baby, home alone, while her husband was at work. Sheriff London was called to the property to intervene. He advised the marshals that Carter's case was in appeal and he deserved due process. They threatened to arrest London, but he stood his ground and they backed off. Carter has battled the IRS for decades over taxes on the earnings of his modest construction business. One court document listed his debt at $145,000. A figure, Carter says, an assessing agent pulled out of thin air. Every time he challenged them, his bill would shoot up a few $100,000. His legal complaints state that the IRS failed to adhere to its own tax code, did not use proper accounting methods, and that the collection activity was unlawful. Because no notices of deficiency were given, Carter says his private and confidential information, including his social security number, was filed in public records and given to third parties. The IRS countered that it can publish and disperse the private information of Americans if it is trying to collect their money or property. A judge agreed. Carter says the IRS is currently claiming he owes $890,000, a figure that doubled with the stroke of a pen. The Taxation and Revenue Department ordered Carter to cease engaging in business in New Mexico until his arbitrary tax debt was paid. Carter appealed this injunction on the grounds that it was both unconstitutional and vague, as it deprived him of his right to make a living and also prohibited him from carrying on or causing to be carried on any activity with the purpose of direct or indirect benefit. The IRS fabricates evidence against citizens by pulling numbers out of a hat and adding fees, said Mack. They wear people down emotionally and financially until they can't take it anymore. No citizen should ever have to fight the IRS for decades in order to keep his land. The IRS is a lie. The income tax is a lie, said Carter. Why should they be able to take anything? They're worse than the mafia. Again, like I said, I always talk about how they are nothing more than a monopoly of a mafia. Any other mafia, they'll shut down because they have that monopoly. The Carter properties have liens placed against them. A locksmith was instructed to change the locks. The IRS authorized the United States Marshal Service to arrest and evict anyone found on the premises. London, however, physically stood in front of Carter's gate until the marshals backed down. A public auction on the front steps of the Eddy County Courthouse is scheduled, but the local county sheriff, trained in the Constitution, resisted. Carter voluntarily vacated his property and relocated his mobile home to an undisclosed location. I choose to leave to keep it from escalating to something ugly, like Ruby Ridge, Idaho, he said. Carter said he advised the marshals and IRS agents who publicly claimed they had armed friends on his land, if there's going to be any violence, it's going to be you who starts it. Carter says 100% of his Social Security benefits is seized each month by the IRS, in addition to $2,800 the agency drained from his bank account. Legally, he says the IRS can take no more than 15% of Social Security benefits. Mack says banking institutions quiver when faced with the IRS Gestapo tactics and generally hand over customers' personal banking information, including access to accounts, without requiring a warrant or even any documentation. He encourages county sheriffs to brief every bank in their jurisdiction to refer inquiries from IRS agents to them. Sheriff Mack is calling for IRS to start following the law, including no random audits without probable cause, as they violate the Fourth Amendment. He asks them to stop committing crimes and rewarding IRS employees with bonuses for cheating on their personal taxes. I agree with Senator Ted Cruz and others who say the IRS should be abolished, said Mack. It's time they got off the backs of the American people. Carter says he prays daily for wisdom and that he is surviving to be able to look into his grandchildren's eyes and tell them he fought for their future and for America. London is the first Republican to ever be elected sheriff in Eddy County. He distributes Bibles on behalf of Gideon International and met his wife in choir practice. So, there's an example. And like I say, the sheriff is one of the most powerful people you can elect within your local county. And that is where a lot of focus should be, is on the county sheriffs. And the county board, too, because a lot of these county boards have been bought out by maybe a bigger city. One I know here in Indiana that it's completely corrupt because you can't escape the city, and the county does not stop the city from expanding. It allows the city to just annex as it chooses. There was an example of that in that county that I'm talking about, where basically the township that they were wanting to annex came all together and basically said, we don't want it. Absolutely not. And I'm talking, we were talking about 85 to 90% of that township didn't want to have anything to do with being in Fort Wayne city limits. And this was Allen County, Indiana. And they didn't care. They annexed them. And this has happened around the country. It happens all the time. If you have a large city, usually it's extremely influential with the county. They're buddy-buddy. The politicians of the county are buddy-buddy with the politicians of these bigger cities. And there's no checks or balances from the county people being able to prevent from being part of the city. And I refuse to live in a place like that, and that's why I live where I do. It was one of those things where you see it happening, and people move outside the city. They get annexed, so they move farther out. Then they get annexed again. And it's just a, cat and mouse game where you're constantly running from the city. I don't want that. Not that I wouldn't like to live where there's maybe easy shopping, not have to travel far for work, but not with all the rules and regulations and ordinances and everything that makes society worse seems to come from a lot of the big cities as I see it. I choose to not live in a city. I like the rural area, and I'm happy where I'm at, and what's great is you can trust the people around you for the most part. You'll always have your crazies, but most people are allowed to pursue their happiness as they choose out here, therefore they don't run into too many problems. Okay. Here's one from countercurrentnews.com. Family raided by police over suspected meth lab that turned out to be maple syrup. A Union County, Illinois family found themselves staring down the barrel or the business end of SWAT cops' machine guns. The raid happened last Wednesday morning when drug agents swarmed their home, armed with military weapons and even a warrant based on nothing more than neighborhood speculation. I heard the dogs barking, and I knew that meant somebody was outside the house, Laura Benson said. And I looked out the window, and I seen a truck coming up the driveway fairly fast. And an ammo police car right behind it. Laura thought that her son must have been in trouble, since she knew she hadn't done anything to justify the raid. They had a report of a meth lab going on our property, and they wanted to investigate it. She couldn't believe her ears. Drugs, meth? They pointed to the buckets, and I told them my husband has a hobby of making maple syrup. Of course, they realized it once they seen it, Laura laughed, but I was quite startled this morning. I think my neighbors on their way to church see the buckets and stuff and think we got meth operation going on here. I just want to put their minds at ease and let them know it's maple syrup, and that they are welcome for pancakes if they want to come on over. The Bensons had a good sense of humor about the whole thing, but this could have ended in tragedy, and for what? Neighbors complaining about rumors and speculations. If that's all it takes to get a drug warrant these days, are any of us really safe? And I want to say no. And this whole meth thing, being right next door to Illinois and Indiana, I've watched it happen multiple times to these people. And like I said, I've told the story before, they get someone that they bust with meth. They give them pad of paper on the spot. And this happened to one guy where basically they busted a guy on a road and he gave him a couple addresses on that road. He had a mobile, I believe. I don't want to say 100%, but I believe he got caught with the mobile meth lab or something to that extent. But he got caught in his vehicle. And they busted down this one guy's door. They flashbanged him. Ripped open his mattresses, his couches, busted holes through the walls, busted all their dishes. The only thing they found was a roach in the wife's purse. Because he was basically scared into it. He had been prescribed medication. He had it in one of those little weekly boxes where you have Monday, Sunday, Monday, all the way to Saturday. You can put all your pills in that. That way, you take them all every day. They tried threatening him, saying that they're not in the right pill bottle. Well, it's in a home. This guy, you have to understand, was completely ignorant of rights. He was one of those unaware people, and I talked to this gentleman. I still think he is pretty unaware. But basically, I scared him into taking a plea deal. He had nothing. His wife had a roach in her purse. He has to take drug classes, is on probation, and they call him with a color or a letter or number or whatever and have him come pee whenever they call. He has to instantly go down. But that wasn't the only one. I started looking, and I found ones that happened before where they turned up nothing, but all of them always turned up literally a small amount, usually less than, an eighth of marijuana, like a roach or something to that extent. The warrants are all based on a possible meth lab. Nothing related to meth is ever brought up after the raid. Only a small amount of marijuana. And because of that, they get a public nuisance because they were raided, even though they weren't raided for marijuana, they were raided for a meth lab. Not even meth user, meth lab. That's how they get the entry, because they can't say, yeah, you can go raid that home with a SWAT team over someone doing meth. But producing it, they can get the warrant. And they've been using this tactic all around the nation. And like this article says, if that's all it takes to get a drug warrant these days, are any of us really safe? Absolutely not. And that's the thing. And again, it goes back to being knowledgeable about your rights. These people are taking plea deals, not getting caught with anything that have to do with meth, no actual evidence that would even suggest other than someone they busted with meth or busted with a mobile meth lab or busted with their own meth lab and tells them this, and they're able to get a warrant. This is the issue. And those people are let go. The ones that are actually caught are let go because they gave up this information. And they're getting plea deals out of this information. Therefore, they don't even have a need to go after that person that they let go. They'll bust him again, get him to say something, and go back into some more homes and get them to get scared and take a plea deal. And I think it's getting completely out of control. Another thing government's getting out of control with is this whole vaccine debate where, California is talking about taking away the exemptions. And I found this article. It's from medium.com. /@ their booted body, bring much relief sanity to the vaccine debate. So it's titled Bringing Much Needed Sanity to the Vaccine Debate. It says here, I've tried to stay away from the vaccine debate, but it's reached a psychological tipping point for me. Watching the back and forth on social media alone has made it clear that there are massive critical thinking issues. And if we're going to get any sort of agreement or respect between the camps, those critical thinking issues have to end. As the title says, I want to bring sanity to the discussion. That doesn't mean I want to change your position on vaccines. It means I want people to stop acting irrationally. So while this is quite random, here's what needs to be addressed in order to restore sanity. Let's fix the misuse of the word consensus. The definition, an idea or opinion that is shared by all the people in a group. How it is used in the vaccine debate, an idea or opinion that is shared by a majority of the people in a group. Why it matters. There has been countless times in history where the majority of scientists and researchers agree and were wrong. Also, using the term consensus in this way is always dangerous in the realm of scientific research because there is an automatic obedience to authority for the simple reason that most people are not truly educated on complex matters of science. A famous example of consensus error is called the Semmelweis reflex. Ignaz Semmelweis was a doctor who found and argued that hand washing by doctors reduced childbed fever mortality rates tenfold. It turns out that medical doctors, a trusted authority, used to perform autopsies and then see patients, including pregnant women, without washing their hands. This was widely accepted practice at the time, and Semmelweis objected to it. He was eventually shouted down and run into an insane asylum, literally, by his peers for advocating something that is blatantly obvious to us today. The consensus argued that argument was used as a weapon to defeat Semmelweis, but consensus is not an argument, and using it as one is a logical fallacy. If you want to argue for the validity of vaccination, do so, but saying there's a scientific consensus isn't a valid argument, especially when you're missing the word or misusing the word consensus. While we're at it, let's make sure we're using the word eradicated correctly. Definition: destroy completely, put an end to. How it is used in the vaccine debate. It was significantly reduced. According to the CDC, measles has never been eradicated, though the term is thrown around pretty loosely. It should also be noted that this is a global economy. We live in a time of planes and boats. Things arrive here from other countries. In other words, blaming the outbreak on unvaccinated people in the U.S. is a bit of a stretch, definitely when it started at Disneyland, a tourist spot for worldwide visitors. This also doesn't take into account that there is a very legitimate debate about the cause of the decline of measles cases and deaths. It should not even, though it is, be automatically assumed that the vaccine ended the epidemic. There is no consensus on that. If you want credibility, you can misuse terms that have very concrete definitions. That's one of the first symptoms of appealing to emotion and debate manipulation. Let's get something else out of the way. Violence can't be your answer. Not everyone advocates for vaccinating people against their will, but many do. One of the legitimate fears among those who don't vaccinate is that vaccine advocates will use the power of government to force vaccination compliance. Hello, California. If you want to be taken seriously, you can't possibly support this because it directly contradicts your own beliefs about your body and your rights. Even though many people have never heard of the non-aggression principle, NAP, they agree with it in its present when it's presented to them. Forced vaccination does not adhere to the non-aggression principle. If you agree with the non-aggression principle, and there are also for forced vaccination, you're contradicting your own beliefs. We're all adults here, so your position with reason. Don't cram it down people's throats or lock them in a room and inject their children with it. I guess this is a good place to throw in this, too. If you're pro-choice when it comes to abortion, then you can't be anti-choice when it comes to vaccines. That's just silliness. It's my body. Can't only apply to killing babies. Reality, both sides want the same thing. An unfortunate charge often wielded by vaccine advocates is that those who choose not to vaccinate are reckless, stupid, and thoughtlessly endangering others. Vaccine advocates are vehemently protective of their family, and so are the parents who choose not to vaccinate. Both sides want the same thing, to make the best decision possible for their family. A key difference is that it often takes more thought to reject the status quo than it does to accept it. This is especially true when you understand that our society's foundation is one of blind obedience. That what's taught to the vast majority of our population through 13 plus years of public schooling, obedience to authority, is why the Stanford prison experiment worked, and it's why the Milgram experiment worked. One of the worst things you can be in life is blindly obedient to authority. It's a forfeiture of your personhood, acknowledgement of your nothingness. So if you are a vaccine advocate, I certainly hope you've done extensive research. Otherwise, you're not just injecting your loved ones with something you know relatively nothing about. You're doing so at the behest of a group of people you largely know nothing about. If you choose not to vaccinate, I certainly hope you've done extensive research as well. Otherwise, you're potentially putting your family members at risk. And it goes on for a little while. You can read the rest of that. Medium.com / the @ symbol there, THERE, booted body / bringing / much / needed / sanity / to / the / vaccine / debate. I will share this on Anti-Tyranny News's Facebook page. That way you guys can find it easier. Facebook.com / Anti-Tyranny News. And it's one of those things that a lot of people go, well, if you don't believe in vaccines, you're a bad person. Who said we don't believe in vaccines? The idea of vaccines has, good things in it. They're is a way to vaccinate. What we don't trust is the pharmaceutical companies and the supporters of this, like, the Gates Foundation. We understand the mentality of these people and the ideology they're brought up on, which is eugenics. And when they blatantly say we can reduce the world's population with vaccines, and that'll help global warming, and feeding into eugenics and the Agenda 21 and basically the elitist mindset, of course we're not going to trust the vaccines that these people are promoting when they promote depopulation. And I just posted that to the Facebook page, so you can go check it out there. I have one from Ben Swan on vaccines, an interview that he did that I want to go ahead and queue up here. And it's again on benswan.com, and its title debate is it anti-vaccination to be pro-information. And this is Ben Swan on RT, but again, benswan.com, you can find it at. So let's go ahead and cue this up here.
California lawmakers have introduced a bill that would end the use of personal belief exemptions, which allow parents to opt out of vaccinating their children. Under the proposed law, all school children would be legally required to get vaccinated unless immunization puts the child's health at risk. The California law is a reaction to a current measles outbreak, which started at Disneyland. It's affected 121 children nationwide, but so far no deaths have been associated with this outbreak. Now, this story is profoundly important, in part because of the fact that most media refuses to debate many of the real issues surrounding the story. I've talked with two experts on this subject. One on one side is Dr. David Katz, the founding director of Yale University's Prevention Research Center. He's authored over 200 scientific papers and chapters, 15 books, and well over 1,000 columns and blogs. On the other side, Mark Blaxell, a founding member of the Canary Party and the author of a new book, Vaccines 2.0, The Careful Parent's Guide to Making Safe Vaccination Choices for Your Family. Now, I asked each of these gentlemen a series of questions, including asking them about a controversial news story that's gotten very little play. When it comes to the issue of children injured by vaccines, there is this major news story that's received very little attention. It revolves around a scientist with the CDC who has come forward admitting that a 2004 article published in the journal Pediatrics omits important information from a study on the link between vaccines and autism. Now, while Dr. Thompson goes on to explain that he believes vaccines have saved and continue to save lives, he clearly admits that the CDC did, in fact, intentionally omit data that demonstrated a connection between an increased risk of autism in African-American males who were given the MMR vaccine before 36 months of age.
The critical study that the CDC put together was one in which Thompson was an author. It was published in 2004, and now, 10 years later, Thompson has basically come out and said, we fudged the data, and he's confessed that there was fraud, scientific fraud in that paper. So if you're a parent and said, if the CDC's been saying for 10 years now that there's no connection between MMR and autism, and that one of the scientists on the paper said, yeah, well, we found some risks. We found that African-American boys were at risk. We found that...
And to be clear on that, they did not say that they had lied because they did find that it did result in autism. He simply said that what we presented was not truthful.
Yes.
That they had hidden information and they had skewed results in order to get an outcome that they wanted, essentially.
And they wanted to report data that would be reassuring to people because only the reassurance they want is that there's no connection. If the data actually says, there's an elevated risk for early exposure to MMR relative to late exposure to MMR. Remember, this wasn't even not vaccinated versus vaccinated. It was just,
that's right.
Were you vaccinated by 36 months or not?
Correct.
The higher risk was early exposure. And if the data ended up not being reassuring, well, the honest scientific thing to do would have been to publish that data, but instead they chose to suppress it.
Do you think stories like that erode confidence in the point that you're making about getting good information out there and trusting those who are experts in this field?
I think constantly questioning answers, of course, erodes confidence. And I don't know what the solution is because, again, everybody's got a megaphone now. Everybody's got a Facebook page. Everybody's got Twitter. And so information flows and every opinion gets out there. In science, there is steady advance, but there are mistakes made. And there are unscrupulous people. Those things do happen. And if every one of those stories gets blown up, then it seems like, we can't trust the weight of evidence. Well, the weight of evidence is pretty reliable. I mean, here we are, Ben, having this interview via Skype. This technology is a product of science. The plane we fly on, product of science. The computers we get our work done on, a product of science. It's a product of the same reliable science that we have these immunizations that really do work.
When it comes to vaccines, there's also the question of information. Often parents who choose not to vaccinate their children or even delay those vaccinations are referred to as anti-vax. But Blaxell says they are actually pro-information. And the information issue is a very important one. Now, there is an issue of something called the VICP, or the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It was brought into law in 1986 by the U.S. Congress. It's a proxy court that's used to determine whether or not children have been damaged by vaccines. As a part of the VICP, there's something called the Learned Intermediary Doctrine, something that actually makes it legal for vaccine companies to not disclose the dangers of vaccines to children. Part of the VICP includes something called the Learned Intermediary Doctrine. Essentially, it states that manufacturers bear no liability for giving or failing to give accurate or complete information to those vaccinated. If that were changed as part of this and everything had to be on the table, would that restore some confidence, do you think, to people who are saying, again, we're not anti-vax, we're pro-information?
It's hard to know, Ben. I'm not sure. I think either of us would need a crystal ball to say for sure. Again, I am completely an advocate of full disclosure, everything we know. But I often see people making mistakes, and I say this as a physician who takes care of patients, but also as someone who does journalism, interacts with large audiences. If you're not trained in science, it's very easy, for example, to hear, hey, so-and-so got a vaccine and was hit by a car that day, and think, well, that's cause and effect. Or so-and-so got vaccinated in childhood and developed autism. That must have been the reason why. Juxtaposing that with formal epidemiologic research that says, wait a minute, let's look at equal numbers of people who do and don't get vaccinated and see what happens to them over equal time periods and compare that. So, there is a problem with the ability to interpret anecdote. It's very compelling. And as you say, if it happens to you or your child, you don't really care what the epidemiologic research shows. You only care about your own life.
Think about cars. Everyone accuses any parent who criticizes or is skeptical of the CDC and the recommended vaccination program, and they instantly start calling people names and calling people anti-vaccine or a risk to society. If you said you wanted better seatbelts or airbags in a car, that doesn't make you anti-car. If you said you don't like lead in gasoline and you want to take lead out of the environment, that doesn't make you anti-transportation. But I think there is this propaganda campaign to suppress any dissent on this issue and any questioning of the official line, and to marginalize people who do question more.
And marginalizing by referring to you all as
anti-vaccine, yes.
Because anti-vax means that you're against all vaccines, which is not the case.
Some people are against vaccines, and that should be a respected point of view, because that's a coherent perspective. But the vast majority of people who are opposing this or questioning the program or going to the pediatrician for the first time with a young baby, they don't have a philosophical point of view against vaccines. All they care about is the health of their child, and they want any medical procedure that's performed on them to be safe.
And by the way, when it comes to this measles outbreak in California, it's not even the largest measles outbreak in recent history. In the summer of last year, 383 people in Ohio's Amish country contracted the measles virus. And again, in that case, no deaths.
BenSwan.com debate, is it anti-vaccination to be pro-information? So you can check that out there. Okay, So, and, again, it goes back to the people that support it, really. Do we have a community of the people that are pushing the vaccine, that are making the vaccine, that are funding the vaccine. Do we trust those people? And I think the answer is, with so much evidence showing that these people aren't trustworthy and they're not looking out for our best interests, there shouldn't be any ability for any government or anybody to force you to take these. You got to remember, every vaccine is experimental because you don't know the long-term effects. But we know that the vaccine regimen has become more and more. More vaccines are added, and autism rates are going up. And when we look at the study about all the autism, and it only affected the black children, well, it did only affect it. It had the most effect in black boys, and this isn't going over every single vaccine that they put on the regimen. If you look at the list of vaccines, and if that one had potential of causing autism in African American boys, what about all the other vaccines, and are those ones only limited to African American boys? And when you looked at the vaccine regimen has just become more and more, and so has autism, you don't actually have to be a scientist to be skeptical of this. You don't. Now, you want to become more informed. That way you know, whether there is any correlation with the more vaccines and autism. But you don't have to be a scientist to be able to look at that and go, I don't want to engage in this until I know true and more of the facts about this. And I think that's where people get shut down. And like that one article said, the consensus. There is no consensus, because not every doctor, not every researcher, not, every scientist believes it. There are doctors that will vaccinate you, but will recommend it for you, but don't vaccinate their own children. And I've seen multiple of them that have admitted to that. No, we don't vaccinate our children, but, Dr. Oz was only one of them. And then, oh, you're not going to get sick from this, Pierce Morgan. This will keep you healthy. Oh, I've never got one before. I haven't had the flu before. Oh, you won't get sick. This is good. Let's stick it in your arm. And then he ends up sick. You would think he would learn his lesson, but apparently not. And here it is. I found it. Oh. This one, unfounded measles parties. Rumors reported based on one woman's remarks. Says here, days after media outlets reported that California's families may be holding measles parties to intentionally infect their unvaccinated children with the disease, the reported source of the rumor told Today.com that she knows of no such parties actually taking place. Julie Schiffman originally told California public media outlet KQED last week that she was approached by a friend who offered to put her in touch with parents of a child infected with measles. Schiffman is a mother of two in Marion County, California, who has not vaccinated either of her children. She said, I know someone who has the measles. Would you like to be connected with them? Schiffman said of her friend. Shortly after the KQED report, media inquiries about measles parties were received by the California Department of Public Health. The California Department of Public Health had no information regarding frequency or locations of measles parties, but issued a statement on Monday warning parents against the practice. And it says CDPH strongly recommends against the intentional exposure of children to measles, as it unnecessarily places the exposed children at a potentially grave risk and could contribute to further spread of the outbreak. As the CDPH statement spread nationwide, media outlets began implying that parents were indeed holding measles parties, the Chicago Sun-Times reported. In a disturbing California Bay Area trend, parents wary of vaccinating their children or their kids are having their unvaccinated children attend measles parties with those who are infected. Saloon reported that Marin County is allowing its residents to have measles parties. Saloon later acknowledged that the report was largely unsubstantiated and apologized for the error. Now, if I can get this to play here. Maybe. Looks like I'm having another internet connection problem here. Think you could get it fixed in. Let me try to bring it back up here. And now I'm kind of screwed. Having all kinds of problems here. Okay. Try my other browser here. I think this looks like it's going to work. Okay, here we go, finally. This is ABC affiliate WCHS. It's a video that's embedded in this article. And this was them making the same claim in an eyewitness news report. So this is what people are hearing from the mainstream media that doesn't actually substantiate any of their claims.
Start your road tripping with Gomar. Go road trip with Go Mart.
Skip this commercial.
Health news tonight. In response to the big measles outbreak nationwide, some parents are now letting their kids go to what they're calling a measles party. Many parents keeping their kids up to date on shots, but others avoiding vaccinations of all kinds at all costs. So some San Francisco Bay Area parents are taking the idea to the extreme, holding measles parties, gatherings where unvaccinated kids are made to hang out with infected kids with the intention of catching the illness. Parents are weighing in on whether or not these measles parties are really a good idea.
I want to be like, come on over and let's all have the disease to get it over with.
Pretty crazy. The California Department of Public Health strongly opposing the intentional exposure of any children to the measles illness.
So these are claims that you get from even your local mainstream. And, you know, just another example of why mainstream media is just not trustworthy at all. Give me a second. I'm just having one hell of a problem right here. Hopefully this works. Okay, let's see if that worked. Probably not. Okay. Well, that didn't work out like I wanted it to. I have to use my slower browser now. This browser just hates me, so does everyone today. I wanted, there's one from the Free Thought Project. Now I have to bring it up on this browser, which might take a minute. This kind of goes back to the police. This one came out of the Free Thought Project. New rights violating operation by San Diego cops makes stop and frisk look like child's play. Says here, San Diego has completed what may be the first in a series of citizen harassment programs similar to New York City's notorious stop and frisk, but far more sweeping. In Operation Lemon Drop, San Diego officers swept through public trolleys at Lemon Grove Station, checking every person aboard to see if they paid the trolley fare. Those who couldn't show proof were taken off for more questioning. Christina Griffin of the ACLU described it as a military operation that would have benefited the apprehension of a terrorist. There were police and sheriff's cars surrounding the Lemon Grove trolley station, and what appeared to be about 70 police, sheriffs, and MTS officers, some in what looked like riot gear. The ostensible goal of Operation Lemon Drop is to catch bad guys before they commit crimes. Pre-crime. Of the 16,631 people harassed by cops over a 4-month period, 186 were arrested. 99% were neither cited nor arrested for anything. Voice of San Diego explains that the targets of the 2014 operation were ex-inmates who had committed non-serious crimes and were freed from jail with no parole or probation requirements. They were released under a 2011 realignment program which shifted some incarceration duties from the state to the county level. The idea of targeting people released from jail is itself an injustice. You have an officer who says, let's go after the worst of worst. Well, if that's what they are, why are they out? Someone has made a determination that they should be released without stipulation, said Stephen Zeidman of the CUNY School of Law. The reality of the Operation Lemon Drop is that thousands of people are subject to dragnet-style questioning, trampling on their simple liberty of riding a trolley in peace. Cops invade your privacy using the bogus reason of a trolley fare, which they actually care nothing about. Besides the assault on freedom, the operation yielded poor results for authorities, with only 1% of the people contacted being arrested, some for misdemeanors. The San Diego Police Department could not even say how many these were the ex-inmates supposedly targeted. San Diego authorities claim that Operation Lemon Drop is reducing the county's crime rate. However, crime is falling across the state of California, and San Diego is the only county where such a program exists, so the veracity of the claim is dubious. Programs like Lemon Drop and New York City Stop and Frisk are spawned from the broken windows theory of policing, where petty offenses are heavily targeted, most often in minority communities. The purpose is to prevent serious crime by creating an atmosphere of order and lawfulness. Criticism of the theory are strong and numerous. In the end, it is just another way for the government to install fear in communities, spend, collect revenue, and use their fancy new military gear. Below is a commercial for violating your rights put out by the San Diego Police Department. And I'll play this for you guys here. If we got enough, yeah, we should have enough time. It's just a minute clip.
The goal of safe communities is to keep our communities safe, opposed to just focusing on the heavy traffic and the heavy concentration during the holiday times between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. We decided to take that same philosophy, which has been very successful for us, and extend it backwards into the summer. Today we're going to be here in Lemon Grove, and we're going to focus on the main business corridor, which has drawn our attention through the information gathered by crime statistics compilated by the crime analysts and the other intelligence that we use to collect information. The more people call and stay engaged, the better off things are going to be for all of us. A phone call or the inquiry is usually a win-win scenario both for the citizen and for the sheriff's department. Because quite frankly, we have the best of intentions, but we can't be everywhere at all times. We can't see everything. So and a large part of our success comes from the community bringing information to us and staying involved through the process. The main way you can call is a non-emergency number, 858-565-5200. We also have Crime Stoppers, 888-580-8477. Crime Stoppers is another way for people to make reports about criminal activity or known locations of criminals who may be wanted in an anonymous way. And we can also follow up and stay in touch in an anonymous way. In some cases.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. But it said here there was a correction. The San Diego Sheriff's Department could not say how many of the rest were the targeted ex-inmates. Original sentence stated it was the San Diego Police Department. It was the San Diego Sheriff's Department. Sheriff officers and Metropolitan Transit System security officers were involved in Operation Lemon Drop. This is government. This is government at its finest. Government will always result to this. You know, when something's usually started, it's always for your safety. But what it turns out to do is abridge your freedoms, and it takes away from your security. So who are they trying to secure it? Well, they're trying to secure, whether the cops know it or not, their ignorance is not what's important. It's what's actually happening in the end. And what they're doing is they're protecting the profits of politicians and the government. And then the politicians and government are still only puppets to the world elitists. And they always think that they're in the same category when really you're, in our eyes, you're up in that category, but in reality, you'll never be the world elitist because they're never going to allow you to. When your services are no longer needed, the world elite are going to leave you in the same bucket that the rest of us are in. And what do you think the rest of society is going to do to the people that sold them out? They think that they're protected, but in the end, they won't be. And some of the world elitists are in the political field, and they create their own dynasties. And I'm kind of glad that I also see freedom dynasties being created out there. These families that are actively educating the children about freedom and what it really means and how government is a corruption. It's a fallacy of basically it's a fallacy trying to create the idea that they'll protect you, they'll secure your freedom when their very existence does the opposite. And again, we have to break this idea. You know, the most dangerous idea is the idea that government needs to exist. Because everything that comes after that we are always fighting when it comes to our wealth, our monetary policy, our kids' education, the health system, the monetary, all of that. And that's what we need to change. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Stay tuned here on UCY for continued vision.